So good morning, everyone. It's so great to have you all here today. And thank you for joining us for UCS's annual Kansas Public Policy Forum. I'd like to take a moment as we begin to thank our state, county, city, and school board elected officials who are joining us today. Welcome. And much appreciation to our agency partners, city and county staff, our advocates, our funders, our UCS board and council advisor members who are also joining us today. And a special thank you to our legislative members who are part of today's program, especially after a late night in Topeka yesterday with a special session. One housekeeping announcement: we encourage folks to use the chat feature for this morning's event. That's where we will be looking for questions and comments. And as I shared earlier, for best viewing experience, we ask that the audio and camera features are turned out throughout the program portion. That way you can have better viewing both of any slides and featured speakers that we have for this morning's presentation. All righty. So I'd like to begin this morning with sharing some of the highlights regarding the UCS's 2022 public policy platform. As I shared, for those that were coming into the room as we began, you may not have heard, but when you received a reminder for your link for this morning's meeting, you also had a link to the public policy platform, and we'll drop that link into the chat feature again throughout this morning. All righty. So as we know, public policy at the local, state, and national levels shape and determine the availability of programs and services that protect, support, and promote the well-being of individuals and families. UCS advocates for policies and positions that invest in our most vital resource, our residents. UCS supports health equity for all Kansans through public policy advocacy, recognizing that everyone should have a fair and just opportunity to be as healthy as possible. Health equity requires that we remove institutional obstacles to health, like disparities in access to housing, education, employment, and services. UCS policy positions cover issues related to economic stability, transportation, housing, healthcare access, well-being and self-sufficiency, youth supports, homelessness, and this year, redistricting. We know that these issues are all really interrelated. To really achieve measurable outcomes in health equity and have a ready and able workforce requires understanding the interconnectedness and addressing these issues really as a continuum. So I'm just going to give you a couple highlights of this morning of our public policy platform this morning and illustrate that interconnectedness. First of all, let's talk about economic stability and housing. As you know, UCS has devoted much of its last 4+ years focusing on safe, stable, attainable housing for Johnson Countyans. And we also know that RDG, who did our housing study, also has been working on the statewide housing assessment. And so certainly we look at how does our housing impact our economic stability? And as you can see by the slide up, that very similar to across Kansas, for those renters in our community, 40% or more are impacted or cost burdened in their housing, which means they're paying more than 30% of their income into cost associated with maintaining their housing. And for our homeowners with a mortgage across the state, that's 1 in 5 or 20%. It's just slightly less in Johnson County. And the other graph really shows you type of households that owning a home with a mortgage, owning a home without a mortgage, and certainly households that rent, that across all categories, we've seen increase in costs at different levels in the last 10 years. And what does this do when I am putting the majority of my income into my housing? How does that impact my economic stability, my healthcare choices, my childcare choices, access to food and other necessities? And really that's what we mean when we talk about that interconnectedness. Let's move on to housing and transportation. Our most recent housing study that was released this year, it shows, and this is a heat map, and so the darker areas show where those jobs are that pay less than $1,250 a month. And this matters because more than 50 52% of our population, 30 and older, work in those jobs. And how do we connect housing and transportation? What are our opportunities to remedy housing solutions near jobs that are more modestly paid? And then how also can we have transportation responses? So if housing, jobs, and transportation were interconnected, what pressure points could that alleviate, especially those lower income residents within our community? And certainly this year, I think will be a pivotal piece of policy we'll hear more about from our legislative panel, and that's really housing and the food tax. You know, we're still one of only 7 states that fully tax food. And when we look at that, the national data, we know that the lowest 20% income earners across our country are paying more than 10% of that income into their food costs, compared to when we look at the highest 20% of income earners across the country who are paying a little over 5% into their food cost. So then we look at that through that lens of housing, and we know that lower income residents are already going to be more significantly cost burdened in their housing. The orange graph bar shows, the darker orange shows if I'm 30% cost burden in my housing, or the lighter orange shows if I'm, severely cost burdened. I'm paying 50% or more of my income into my housing. So what does that look like when both who is disproportionately impacted by some of our policies and some of our rising costs fall into the same category? And are we creating a situation where that cycle is never ending and there's not an opportunity to reach economic stability without very intentional policy intervention to support especially our lowest income households and workforce within our communities? And then that all connects back to economic stability and healthcare access. We know that where Johnson County residents obtain health insurance differs depending on household income level. People at the highest income level are more than 3 times likely to get their health insurance through their employer. So having that offset or defer some of those costs that would not be fully the burden of the income earner. And so that makes a difference too. So if I am on the lower spectrum of income earning, which if we think about it, about 40% of jobs in Johnson County fall into 3 categories around food, service, and prep, around customer service and retail, and around office administration support. And medium wage tops out around $36,000. So what does that mean when I think about covering the cost of my housing, covering the cost of my insurance, the likelihood that I'll have employer supported insurance, and covering the cost of my food? We do know that those states that have chosen to expand Medicaid, study out of Columbia University has shown that there's been a significant reduction in evictions in Medicaid expansion states compared to non-expansion states when we look at that data between 2002 and 2016. So how has alleviating and supporting some of the costs of my health care allowed me to then focus on addressing my cost of my housing? And then certainly what we'll be focusing on today in our key presentation is economic stability and childcare. Throughout the pandemic, the census has been doing what they've called the Household Pulse Survey. This one is looking at the August 2021 Household Pulse Survey. Around 300,000 Kansans responded to the Pulse Survey during that time period. Almost 68,000 identified experiencing interruption in their child care for children 0 to 5 in that survey. So this gives a breakdown of, am I interrupted in looking for a job because I need to stay home and cover childcare that is not available or attainable? Do I need to take unpaid leave? Do I need to take sick days, vacation days? And it could be a combination. I could have taken all the sick days and vacation days that was allowable within my benefits package with my organization. So now I'm going into unpaid time. Or maybe I needed to step away completely because I'm in a job that working remotely was not an option. So certainly that is a part of the picture when we are talking about childcare issues. And then finally, right now, we're in that redistricting process. So representation matters. Having the ability to elect folks who have similar lived experiences and can see through that lens of a geographic area within a community of what are some of the pinch points and needs is important, right, in that redistricting process. So it's important that we're using data and drawing lines in an equitable, fair, and a way that's reflective of the citizenry that we are representing and sensitive to our diversity. So those are some of the issues that we're covering in our public policy platform this year as we go into the 2022 legislative session. So at this time, it is my pleasure to present Melissa Ruper, the Executive Director of the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund, and John Wilson, the President of Kansas Action for Children. Melissa was named Executive Director of the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund in 2019. Before joining the Cabinet, Melissa served 3 terms in the Kansas House of Representatives, representing House District 25. Her work in the legislature focused on children's issues and public education. Melissa was recognized that high quality early childhood interventions led to student success and made funding those programs her priority. She played a lead role in drafting new school finance formula for K-12 public education that includes an expansion of preschool, at-risk program, and full funding for all-day kindergarten. John Wilson joined Kansas Action for Children in 2017. He spent the previous 10 years working at the intersection of design, public health, and policymaking. John helped build the Alliance for a Healthier Generation into the nation's leading nonprofit organization focused on children's health. And as a Kansas state representative, John worked to redefine the culture of the legislature to make it more open and collaborative. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Melissa and John.
Thanks very much, Julie. It's my pleasure to be back with UCS today and with my colleague, John Wilson. We are happy to present a deeper dive on early childhood issues in Kansas. I want to first set the stage for what state level collaboration looks like. Since arriving at the cabinet in 2019, I have been part of an effort that involves 4 state agencies that is funded currently by a federal grant called the Preschool Development Grant. So it's a collaboration between the Kansas Children's Cabinet, the Kansas Department for Children and Families, the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, and the Kansas Department of Education. We call the effort All In for Kansas Kids, and the vision that we have collectively created for our work is that every child in Kansas thrives. So that said, let me give you a little bit of background on the cabinet for those who don't have familiarity with what we do. The Children's Cabinet was created in state statute by the legislature in 1999 as a response to the Kansas involvement in the master tobacco settlements. The statute directs that the annual share of the tobacco settlement funding be allocated to the a transfer each year from the Kansas Endowment into what we call the Children's Initiatives Fund. The acronym for that is CIF, and the cabinet is the party responsible for managing the CIF budget. I would say the bulk of the CIF is actually passed through transfers to our partner state agencies. There is a fund in the CIF called the Early Childhood Block Grant, which the cabinet board actually manages. So we do a competitive RFP process each year to call for applications and make grant awards in the block grant. The cabinet is governed through a 9-member board. It's a combination of legislative appointments and gubernatorial appointments. People serve for 4-year terms and come from a variety of backgrounds. We are also the state lead agency on the collaboration through the federal preschool development grant. The cabinet is serving as a number of specific actions. So we are to make annual recommendations to the governor and the legislature. We are to coordinate, collaborate, and engage multiple state agencies that are involved in the early childhood care and education system. Julie, I think you can go to the next slide. So we recognize the importance of early childhood. Those first 5 years are crucial in a child's life. There is explosive brain development that goes on in the first 3 years of life. Research shows there are 1 million neural connections a second being formed in a child's developing brain, and that the quality of their interactions at every minute of every day matters. And so we want children growing up in healthy environments. So we have adopted what is known as a mixed delivery system. It's based on an approach the cabinet adopted years ago called the Blueprint for Early Childhood. The Blueprint focuses on healthy development, strong families, and early learning. And you can see the array of services depicted in the infographic reflect that those different elements that services provided by state agencies that affect healthy development, strong families, and early learning. Our mixed delivery system for early care and education also includes multiple sectors so not just these particular types of services, but multiple providers. So when you're talking childcare, that might look like a home-based licensed provider, a childcare center, a faith-based program, a community organization that's providing childcare. In Kansas, we welcome and support that mixed delivery system so that families have the ability to find care that fits their needs, and that in communities across the state that look very different, there are community-driven solutions to delivering services to the families, the children that need them. Next slide, Julie. So as part of our all-in work in 2019, the first year of the grant, we had a one-year planning grant from the Preschool Development Grant Program, and we had 2 key activities. We conducted a needs assessment of the care and education system, and then we translated the findings of the needs assessment into a strategic plan for early childhood. It's a 5-year strategic plan. So the key findings of our needs assessment work involve 2 central messages. Number 1, the experience of families with young children in Kansas are shaped by where they live. And that means both regionally. Are you in an urban core environment? Are you in a rural setting? Are you in a frontier rural place? Are you in a suburban place? But it's also within those communities. Where you live matters in your ability to connect to the services that your children need. And then number 2, that there are too many children in Kansas growing up in families where basic needs are not being met. Julie just went over what types of things we consider basic needs in the Johnson County data set that she shared, but we see similar findings statewide. So we are really focused on solving these 2 central issues. The key findings of the needs assessment are organized by the categories that you see on screen. Accessibility, can families connect to services? Availability, are services even available for families to connect to? Navigation, we leave families to really adopt a connect the dots approach for themselves. It's very difficult to navigate our system, and we as state agencies have been working on streamlining from a process standpoint and a communication standpoint to make navigating the system much easier. Collaboration became an issue that rose to the top of our needs assessment work because there are such scarce resources for early childhood that the competition for funding, most of it comes through grants and competitive processes. It makes it difficult for programs to collaborate. They definitely express a desire, they want to, but actually doing so can be very difficult when you're competing for the same dollars. Workforce is probably the area that the pandemic has exacerbated. Most of all, that and availability go hand in hand. Our workforce is aging out of the profession. That was true in 2019 prior to the COVID pandemic, and it's only been made worse since then. Pay for providers is, it's terrible. The statewide average is about $9 an hour for a childcare provider. And it's just not a profession that it's easy to recruit into. So recruitment and retention are a focus area of ours. Facilities across the state, there's either a lack of actual facilities at all, or there are facilities in need of upgrades to the physical environment and to the materials that the facilities have to work with, from curriculum to toys to outdoor spaces to you name it. We have aging facilities or a lack of facilities. Systems alignment speaks to state level work. That's the work of the state agencies to break down barriers and knock down the silos that exist between different programs and work on a better aligned system that is leveraging available resources effectively and efficiently, rather than seeing duplication of effort because agencies aren't talking to each other. And then we didn't want to leave this report without noting the bright spots that we found along the way. We did 53 community engagement sessions across the state. We did a wealth of other types of listening and site visits and engagement and surveys and information gathering. And there are some real bright spots in Kansas: innovation, communities that have risen to address the issues in unique ways that we wanted to highlight. So we included those things as well. Next slide. All of that translated into our strategic plan for early childhood. And when I'm done talking, I will put the link to our website in the chat for you. But we really aligned the strategic plan around the needs assessment findings. So we have the goal areas that you see on screen, and we have strategies and specific tactics for achieving our goals outlined in the strategic plan. That was completed in April of 2020, which was fortunate because we were well equipped to rise to the occasion during the emergency as COVID emerged. Childcare was not shut down at any time during the pandemic. It was left as a local decision for individual providers to make, but they were not shut down by the state because there was recognition that the rest of our frontline workers could not report to work unless there were safe environments for their own children to be cared for. And so we have really helped support providers through the conditions that existed. It has not been easy these last 18 or 20 months. It's been scary. Their business model is fairly broken, so it has required a lot of emergency support and intervention to help keep childcare available and accessible. And I know we conducted a refresher of our needs assessment to look at 2020, and we know that all of the things we documented in 2019 were exacerbated and intensified by the pandemic. So we are working on strategies using the framework of our strategic plan and what we knew ahead of time to address the needs that exist. And I'm going to turn it over to John so that he can talk a little bit more about what some of that relief effort might look like.
Thank you, Melissa. And I just first have to say I'm really grateful for this opportunity, and especially grateful to be sharing the stage with you, Melissa, and sharing the room with so many great advocates out there who understand the need to have good data to inform policymaking decisions, who understand and are interested in the fact that childcare is the workforce behind the workforce, and that we can't get our economy back up and running without addressing the real crisis we have in childcare in Kansas and in Johnson County specifically. You know, I I'm a big believer in the phrase, knowledge is just knowledge. It's not power. It only becomes power when you take action with that knowledge. So what Melissa has shared and what I will share is information and knowledge, but we also want to leave you with some actions that you can take to start to make a difference on these issues and to really turn that knowledge into power. So before we talk about the things that can be done or will be done, I want to just kind of localize the childcare crisis to Johnson County with some data. And again, no matter where you look for data, it's all going to say the same thing about childcare, that we are in a moment of crisis and it will get worse if we don't take immediate action to address it. And this crisis is disproportionately impacting women who often leave the workforce to care for kids. It's impacting women who are often the childcare workforce, and it's disproportionately impacting people of color. And so we have to do something about this. And I hope that this isn't just another webinar that you attend and feel smarter after attending it, but you choose to use your voice and to use your vote to make a difference on these issues. So let's start with a little call and response here. I wonder if if folks in the chat, if you want to put what you think the average monthly cost of infant care in Johnson County is, just put a guess out there. $1,200, $2,000, $3,000, $1,200, $1,200. Okay, yeah, seeing a trend. There's some smart folks in this room. According to Child Care Aware of Kansas data, infant care in Johnson County monthly, $1,531. The numbers are similar actually for toddlers as well. What about for preschool, kind of three-year-old, 4-year-old? Any sense of the cost of childcare in Johnson County? Kim, I'm seeing 900. Yeah. All right, Heidi, 1,100. You all are right around that target. The $994 is the average cost of monthly cost of 3-year-old care in Johnson County, and that's right. So that's at center-based care. If we look at the costs are similar for family child care providers, and as we all know, there's multiple types of licensed providers in Kansas. So it's significant, and in fact, for many Kansans, actually, they end up spending about 18% of their annual income on childcare for infants. And we already talked about the cost burden of housing. So when you add on top of that infant care at 18% of your annual income, it's unsustainable, especially when the federal government says that 7% of annual income is kind of considered cost burden, anything over that. So pretty significant. Some other data that I pulled from Child Care Aware that I think is important to understand is since 2019, there's been a decrease of 91 licensed providers in Johnson County. That's across child care centers, that's family child care providers, preschool programs, school age programs. But when you think about a loss of 91 programs and the number of kids that can be served by that, that is significant. That is hundreds and hundreds of children who aren't able to be cared for, meaning many parents have to make terrible choices. Do they drive further to provide care for their kids? Does one of the parents leave the household? Or if there's not 2 parents in a household, what are folks supposed to do? So the numbers are just they're troubling. It reveals the crisis that we're in. And so I think we could go on and on talking about the numbers, but I don't want to kind of dwell on the problem. I want to talk about the state and federal solutions to this challenge that also could help, I think, really strong local efforts that are happening around the state to address this. Melissa talked about the kind of regulatory changes and the agency changes that are happening to do this. So then the next area of focus are what are the state statutory changes that can happen, and then what are the federal changes. So I first want to start by the federal changes because it's probably gotten a lot of attention if you've paid attention to the news any recently. And that's from the Build Back Better Act, which is a historic piece of legislation that recently passed the US House. And should note that the only representative from Kansas to support the legislation is Representative Sharice Davids. If you are a parent of a young child or know parents of young children, the Build Back Better Act will make immediate and significant improvements in your life and the lives of families around the state in a couple of specific ways. First, as you'll see on the slides here, around childcare, there's a huge expansion of the childcare subsidy program. And when fully implemented, the intent is that no families making up to 250% of median income in Kansas pay no more than 7% of their household income towards childcare. But starting, if the Build Back Better Act passes the Senate and is signed by President Biden and it contains these provisions, starting in 2022, families making 75% of the median state income will have no copays to pay for childcare, saving them thousands and thousands of dollars a year for childcare, freeing up those funds to pay rent, to pay for utilities, to pay down debt, to stimulate the economy in all these different ways. The Build Back Better Act also includes universal pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds. That is essentially adding 2 more years of universal education to our K-12 system. And as Melissa mentioned, these first 5 years of a child's life are the most critical towards their development. So imagine the long-term benefits when all Kansas children aged 3 and 4 are able to be connected to high-quality pre-K programs. Another key element of the Build Back Better Act is paid leave. 4 weeks of paid leave for folks to take care of their own health needs and to care for the needs of their family. I mean, that is huge. We are the only industrial country in the world that doesn't have a paid family leave program, and this is long overdue. And it's certainly not a guarantee that this provision will stay in as it goes to the US Senate, but it is something that all of us should be asking for and demanding of our lawmakers. And the final provision, I think it's worth noting, is the extension of the child tax credit. Many of you all likely, if you have children, young children, received the child tax credit this year in the form of monthly payments. And in the Build Back Better Act, there are provisions to extend that for another year, the monthly payments and tweaks to eligibility for the child tax credit. We've already seen that this expansion of the child tax credit has lifted families out of poverty. And so this is something that, again, is only a 1-year extension, but I imagine that it'll remain so popular that Congress will find ways to make this a permanent change. So there are other provisions of the Build Back Better Act that are important to me, elements of climate change and housing and college affordability, but these are the ones that are related to childcare and helping kids and families. And I think it's worth noting, if you've ever heard me present, you'll hear me say that the needs of children are kind of like a recipe and not a menu. In a recipe, you need every ingredient for the recipe to turn out. In a menu, you can pick and choose what you want. We can make huge investments in childcare, but we will undercut those investments or negate those investments if kids are also going back to houses where they can't put food on the table, or there is no stable housing, or parents can't meet their basic needs, because we know children don't raise themselves. So as we talk about childcare, we also have to talk about other areas: family economic security, healthcare, housing, all of these things. We cannot silo these things because they aren't siloed, and we undercut investments in any of them when we don't focus on all of them. So recognizing Melissa and I really want to get to your questions and have some time for discussion, I want to get to the final slide here and talk about some opportunities coming up in the 2022 legislative session that kicks off January 10th of 2022. Some things that we are paying attention to that we think could make an impact on childcare costs and accessibility are, first, removing barriers to accessing the child care subsidy program and food assistance program. There were barriers created under the Brownback administration that make it very difficult to access these programs that help families meet their basic needs, which we know Kansans are struggling to do. And so KAC is working with dozens of partners to eliminate these barriers. And we'll, before we end today, I'll give you a way to contact me so that you can also join us in that effort. Another big one that has an impact on kids and families and childcare providers is the elimination of the state sales tax on food. The reason being is many family childcare providers purchase their weekly snacks and meals at grocery stores. If we eliminate the state level sales tax on food, that will save providers hundreds of dollars every year that they can put towards their own pay, or they could maybe start to afford health insurance, or they can reinvest it in other ways in their business. The thing that you need to understand about the food sales, state level food sales tax elimination, is that we can afford to do it. Now is the time to do it because families have been struggling for the last several years under the pandemic and prior to the pandemic, and that we need lawmakers to keep it simple. There is no need to attach this policy to other pieces of tax legislation. We can afford it now, but if we start to add too many other policies to it, it becomes unaffordable in the long run. And the last thing that we want to do is to do something to benefit Kansas households, every Kansas household that buys groceries, and then take it away from them. So this is a very important policy, and I would hope that lawmakers can get a bill to the governor's desk by January 29th, which is Kansas Day in 2022. We can do it, we have the money to do it, and now's the time to do it. The next piece is we'd like to see changes in the eligibility of the Children's Health Insurance Program. Currently, that eligibility is tied to 2008 income guidelines. And if you know anything about inflation at this point, you know that that is no longer sufficient, hasn't been sufficient. And this is a tweak that we can make, and we believe is a bipartisan, simple change that can happen. Because again, when children have access to health insurance coverage, it allows them to kind of grow up healthy and thrive, and it enhances the investments we make in childcare. And also, quick side note, Kansas is one of those states that still hasn't expanded Medicaid coverage, providing health insurance to low-income families. We have to do that because we also know that when parents and caregivers have health insurance coverage, their kids are more likely to be covered, and they're more likely to attend routine healthcare visits kind of early in their lives. And then the final piece is that Kansas currently has a tax credit available to employers who help their employees find childcare or pay for childcare, but it's a really underutilized tax credit. So last year, a bill was introduced to change that, to open it up to more types of businesses and change the types of services that are eligible for employers to pay for. And that bill now is ready for a vote on either the House and the Senate floor, and we believe that there's strong bipartisan support for it. But it would not hurt, especially for folks in Johnson County, to contact legislative leadership from Johnson County to say, let's get this bill done, because it's something that won't add any, kind of take away anything from the state. The state already budgets for this tax credit. It's just not being utilized because not enough businesses, especially small businesses, can take advantage of it. So all of these policies collectively chip away at childcare cost or increase access to childcare. And these are all the types of issues that are bipartisan, and we think that we can get done quickly in the legislature, but we just need to make sure lawmakers understand their value to their constituents and communities. With that speed talking, I'm going to pause, and Melissa and I are ready to talk show host, answer questions here.
I see a couple in the chat already that both have to do with children with disabilities and the childcare needs. I would say that is an issue of funding, as most things are. KDHE is the agency through the Bureau of Family Health that has different programs for children with special healthcare needs. We have focused the Child Care Systems Improvement Team, which KDHE organizes to take a look at some of those issues for families with children with disabilities. Our preschool development grant has granted sub-grants, and one of the areas that we focused on was helping with non-traditional types of care, which is after hours and weekend care, and infant and toddler care, and care for children with disabilities. So we are highly aware that this is a very difficult type of childcare to find. There are a couple pilot programs. Supporting You is the name of one of them, and Bridges is another, which are designed to help families with children with special healthcare needs navigate the system and support each other through peer mentoring and different types of programs. So it is a focal point of our work. We are doing the best with available resources would be my best answer at the moment, which I know is not a great answer.
Melissa, and John, another question was around universal pre-K, around who would provide it, and if it's public schools, do we have a concern regarding staffing availability and space availability?
Well, we certainly have concerns about both. The decision will be left up to the states regarding whether it is through the Department of Education or a partnership. I would say Kansas is looking at those issues very carefully and very quickly. It is agreed that simply giving it to the State Department of Education is probably not the desirable route because we do have a mixed delivery system. And so there is latitude for the governor to apply for the funds and identify either the team that will take the lead or the specific organizational structure.
Yeah, and I should note, I didn't touch on this, but in the Build Back Better Act, there is an opportunity to increase the pay for early childhood educators over time. And I don't think I touched on this, but according to BLS data, in Johnson County, the mean wage for early childhood educators is $23,640 a year. And under the Build Back Better Act, states would be required to kind of create quality rating improvement systems and also create a structure to enhance provider pay regardless of the setting that they work in. I see a question related to paid family leave provisions of the Build Back Better Act. I'm going to paste a link to a great summary of some of those provisions of the Act in the chat box, but the answer is all types of employment are covered under paid family leave. So independent contractors, employees, so on and so forth.
Wonderful. And with that, many thanks to both Melissa and John. And at this, we appreciate your presentation this morning, and we appreciate the time and responding to the questions. And we may still have questions coming into the chat, but at this time, we're going to move to Patty Markley and to our legislative panel. So thank you so much. And we're going to go through the fun technical change of spotlighting Patty and Senator Corson and Representative Chris Croft. So I'll leave it to Patty.
Thanks so much, Julie. First of all, I want to thank our two legislators for being here this morning. I know they had a special session that went till about 11:30 last night. So I'm sure there will be lots of interest in hearing about that. But first of all, thank you so much for taking the time after your long day to be with us. Today we have Senator Ethan Corson with us and Representative Chris Croft. Senator Corson is serving his first term in the Senate, and he represents District 7. He serves on the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regulations and the Senate Committee on Utilities and Redistricting, Judiciary, Assessment and Taxation, Legislative Post-Audit Committee, and the Joint Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice Oversight. Those senators have a lot of committees that they need to serve on. There's only 40 of them and they're stretched pretty thin. Representative Chris Croft has served District 8 since 2019. He is the chair of the House Committee on Redistricting and the vice chair of the House Committee on Insurance and Pensions. He serves on the House Committee on Water, Commerce, Labor and Economic Development, and the 2019 Special Committee on Federal and State Affairs. Unfortunately, Senator Olson has a conflict and he was unable to join us today. But we will have a great opportunity to talk with Senator Corson and Representative Cross. So each panelist will be asked to share a brief look ahead, no more than 3 to 5 minutes, on what they think will be key issues for the 2022 legislative session, as well as if they want to discuss the special session that was held yesterday. So Senator Corson, we'll start with you.
Well, thanks so much for that introduction, Patty. And I just want to thank UCS for all that they do and for having me here today and for this opportunity. I'm also really appreciative of the work that Melissa and John are doing on early childhood and childcare. My wife and I, we have a 2.5-year-old. And so like a lot of families in our community, we've been navigating these issues of 2 working parents, of childcare, We're really grateful for great supports like the Shawnee Mission School District Parents as Teachers program, but we've also had challenges like childcare providers closing and things like that. So I'm just really appreciative of that work. And I do support the legislative priorities of UCS and those that are outlined by Melissa and John. So I'm really hopeful that we'll see action on those in the session. A couple issues that I will mention that I'm hopeful that we'll take action on. One is obviously redistricting. I'm going to leave that primarily to Representative Croft because he's doing a really capable job in chairing the House Redistricting Committee. And so I will let him talk about redistricting. Eliminating the food sales tax, I think that it should be a bipartisan priority, and we need to get that done early in this session so families can start feeling that relief. I think we've got a real chance to do medical cannabis. That bill passed the House. It did not pass the Senate. I think we can get that through this session. Kansas right now, we're one of only 3 states that has not yet legalized some form of medical cannabis. It did receive bipartisan support in the House from members all across the political spectrum. 68% of Kansans support medical cannabis. So I'm hopeful that we'll see that. Sports wagering is something that 25 states currently have, and we've been trying to work out a bill for a number of years. I think that now is the time for Kansas to join those 25 states. Hopeful to see that this session. I would also like to see property tax relief, especially for seniors. If you think about how important this is in a community like Johnson County, we came really close this past session on a bill that I was proud to be a co-sponsor of that would have, for a significant number of our fixed income seniors, would have frozen their property tax assessment at what it was when they turned 65 to try to provide some stability and some security for those folks who want to age in place, who want to stay in their home as they get older, as they retire and are on a fixed income. State employee pay raises. We did pay raises for just the judicial branch last session, but we are having significant challenges in hiring qualified, capable folks in a number of our state agencies, including our Department of Corrections, in part because our salaries are just so far below what folks can get in the private sector. So I think we need to be focused on a broad across the board state employee pay raise. And then I think the issues around childcare and early childhood that Melissa and John did such a good job of outlining, I would just echo my support for them and my very sincere hope that we will see action on them this session. So thank you again for having me.
Great, thanks so much. Representative Croft?
Thanks, Patty. Can you hear me okay?
Great.
Yeah, sorry about that. I just got in, so I ran downstairs. Again, thanks to UCS and having us at this event, as the senator already mentioned. And you know, as I was listening to all the comments at the very beginning from Julie, it's really important that you do stay on top of those topics and help educate all of us on those issues. It helps us produce better legislation, and I really appreciate that. And I would echo a lot of the similar comments. You know, I think redistricting is going to be a big issue. Obviously, in my life, it will be. So we'll see how that goes. It'll be a lot of fun. It has already been a lot of fun, and we're going to have some more tonight. I do think the taxes, as we're talking about, are going to be a big element of next year. You know, we tried to pass food sales tax several years ago. We would already be about halfway through that right now. It was based off, you know, countering an online sales tax, but it's water on the bridge at this point. I'm excited that we're going to get after food sales tax. It's really important. The same thing with the seniors, as the senator said. You know, we had worked on that also last year on our side of it, and I agree. I think my concern is that as they go through it, they have a valuation limit of $350,000. If you're on a fixed income, you're on a fixed income. If you've been in this community since it was formed and you've built that, you've been part of help building it, and now we're forcing you out of it, I think that's an issue. And I don't think we should have a top end. So I have some concerns on that bill. I'm really excited about it, and I will keep fighting for everybody on that one. But another one in there is about your valuations, as we just talked, as I mentioned. The problem we have is if you go through that process, it's brutal. And at some point you have to start bringing in lawyers and everything else. And what I would prefer is that we have some form of mediation process. We put the bill in 2 years ago. We're trying to put the bill in again. We're going to see if it's going to gain any traction this year. But there are so many things out there. We're just going to have to keep working these until we finally get them through. You know, I think some of the other concerns we have is we're starting to see all of our IT systems have issues. As we're talking about food sales tax, right now our sales tax system can't handle a different kind of sales tax option. That's a problem. We're going to have to figure that out. It's got to build in that program. The other thing too is we're talking about groceries, and I think we should first, but then we're also saying, well, they can't, if we're really worried there, then we might have to expand it to other things. I mean, one step at a time. I'm good with the one step. We just got to look at it. And I do agree with the senator. I think we are going to see some sports wagering coming out. It's gone a long ways. But I also am concerned about our unemployment process and whether we can get it. We got to get it back together. We've got a whole bunch of IT issues out there, and we've just got to stay focused and diligent on this and get it fixed. We've got to fix this for the future. Otherwise, we'll run into the same problem again in the future. And I just think that's not proper and prudent on our part. With that, I know, Patty, you're going to talk about redistricting, so I'll just hold and I won't go into any details. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so Senator Corson, maybe the first question for you. You both had mentioned reducing or eliminating the food sales tax is on the short list for, it's been on the short list for the last few sessions. And I know that the people there seems to be a lot more discussion about commitment to doing that. So what do you think the chances are that we will take action this year on this issue and actually do it?
Yeah, I'm going to be an optimist about this. I think that the governor has been very aggressive in supporting it. We've had really positive comments from Republican leadership in both the House and Senate. So I'm really hopeful that this is something that we can coalesce around early in the session. We are in a real position because of our fiscal strength. We're in the strongest position we've ever been as a state in terms of our revenues. And so now is the time to do it. It would cost us about $450 million, but we have record reserves approaching almost $2 billion. So we can afford to do this. And so I think we need to act on it. And just to give you some more background about why I think this is such an urgent priority that I think affects everybody, because we all eat, we all buy food, we all buy food ingredients. I mean, this is tax relief that is as broad-based as you can get. This is, a lot of times we're really focused on tax relief for a specific group. This is really the kind of broad-based tax relief that I love to support. It would save an average family of four $500 a year. It's really pro-business, especially in our part of the state where Representative Croft and us live, because right now so many folks, we're really penalizing our grocers because so many folks are going over to Missouri to get the benefit of that lower food sales tax, and it's hurting our Kansas grocers and grocery businesses. So we really want to eliminate that. I mean, if you think about how that would help strengthen Johnson County, that's another reason I'm a big supporter. At 6.5%, our rate is the second highest in the country. 37 states don't tax groceries. 6 that do have a reduced rate for food. We tax it at the full rate. So we're really regressive in this, and regressive in the sense that it is, as was mentioned by Julie, it's lower income Kansans who spend such a higher percentage of their income on food. So I'm optimistic. I'm going to be really bullish on this. I again think for all of our participants, it's good to continue to engage with your officials and let them know that you also want this to be a real priority when we come back in January.
Great, thanks. Representative Croft, I saw you nodding along to some of the comments Senator Corson said. I didn't know if you wanted to add anything about food sales tax.
Yeah, no, and he's absolutely right. I mean, we do have, I think this is the opportunity and time to do this, and I'm excited that we're going to go down this path. There's so many things that we can fix, but we do have to make sure we pay attention that the system doesn't allow it. And I want to make sure we're talking about this too, is that we're actually eliminating the sales tax. We're not giving a rebate. There's a difference there. I mean, the rebate gets money at one time, one slot. It actually doesn't put money back in. It really needs to be done, a removal of this tax, so we can actually help everybody out every day as we're going through. And he's right on target. All those other things, he's got a better memory than me, so I appreciate that.
Appreciate that. Okay, well, Representative Croft, as we mentioned, you are the chair of the House Redistricting Committee, and I know there's a lot of interest with our participants on that issue, especially obviously as we're in District 3. And the second rounds of hearing began last evening, and for public input on that. At hearings earlier this year in Overland Park, many people spoke about the interest to keep Johnson and Wyandotte County together and intact. Now, since we have those census numbers, we know that that doesn't quite really support that approach, right? The numbers are what they are. So maybe you can touch on the challenges your committee faces balancing the population realities and what they are versus the community needs and how you go about doing that. And I also thought while you're doing that, I can put a link into the Kansas Legislative Research Department. They're on the legislature website, kind of all that data that really goes into, has maps and data showing population change, you know, for district all the way down to state house seats. So I thought maybe we could include that in the chat for our participants. So
yeah, Patty, thank you. Yeah, thanks. And I agree. We've asked them to put all this data online so everybody can access it and see it, because at the end of the day, it's a math problem. I mean, sorry, my phone decided that it didn't like something. I don't know. So it's a math problem. We just have to work that out. So as you stated, we did start round 2 of our listening tours, and I kind of want to be, specific about that. They are listening tours. There are our opportunity to hear what the public has to say. So, and we did it earlier because the idea was before all the data came out, because we wanted to hear what people had to say about their communities. If you think about this, we're drawing the lines, and it could be perceived we're sitting in a room where we're drawing the lines. Okay, if that's what's happening, what we want is, what do I need to consider? And that's why I was so specific about wanting to do all these listening tours, so we could hear what people on the ground say, and then we can incorporate what they have to say in what we're doing. And last night we got some really good feedback. There were some maps, not maps, but drawings that were provided to us to say, hey, when you're doing this area, consider this. And so I would encourage folks that last night the focus was on the 2nd congressional district. Tonight will be the 1st congressional district. Then Monday the 29th will be the 4th. And then on Tuesday the 30th, we'll be focused on the 3rd. So if that's your congressional district, and I would encourage you to sign up. Let us know that you want to provide your input. And then the other thing is, if those times don't work or you don't want to do it publicly or verbally or by Zoom or WebEx, then I encourage you to just send it in by email, which is at redistricting@klrd.ks.gov. And Patty, I know you'll put all that in there, so I appreciate that. I'm actually really excited about all the discussions we've had so far and what we're doing. But again, not just your community, not just your physical community, but your communities of interest and things that you want us to consider. So throw it all in there. Tell us what you want us to think about as you're going through it, as we're going through it, so that way we can do the best possible maps that we can. So.
Hey, Patty, one thing I would add that I'm really excited about in this process is there's been understandably a lot of discussion about congressional district lines, but what I'm excited about this process is that I think Johnson County is positioned to gain, I think, probably around 3 House seats, 1 to 2 Senate seats. I think that's a real positive for our county because we will, because of our population growth, finally have the number of representatives and senators that is commensurate with our role as the economic driver of the state of Kansas. So I think that having additional representation from our county will benefit us. Sometimes I get questions, are these going to be Republican seats or these be Democrat seats? And my answer is That's for the voters. I mean, that's going to be
right.
decided. But my interest is just having more folks from Johnson County, so we are getting the number of folks that's commensurate with our role as the economic engine for the state of Kansas. So I think that's exciting. I just wanted to throw that in because there's been so much focus on the congressional seats. I think that this legislative redistricting is also going to be a positive for Johnson County.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I noticed just looking through it the other night, there's one House seat that has, I think, it's 39% over the number that you should have. So that just kind of gives an example of what the growth in Johnson County has been. And there's several of them that are 20%, 30%, 17%
Right.
over the annual. So that just shows what this last 10 years, the growth in our county has been. Well, thanks so much for that.
There is a question in the chat, Patty, for
Thanks.
our panel. It's around talking about the reserves that are that Senator Corson had mentioned, and if there's other tax reduction consideration, in this case, maybe around property or sales tax, that's in the mix when we think about that opportunity.
Senator Corson, you want to take this one first?
Sorry, so the question is both on the property taxes for homeowners and on the food sales tax. On the property tax piece, the question is really about how does this impact revenues at the local city county level? I think that's a fair point. I think more generally, though, the bigger concern is that we're pricing long-term residents out of the communities that, as Representative Croft said, they've been in, they've helped build. So I think there will be some impact on city and county revenues. I don't think it will be dramatic. We're talking about a relatively focused program. There would be, under the versions that we've looked at, there would be certain qualifiers. So it would be that your home has to be under a certain assessed value. It would be that your combined household income has to be under a certain amount. There have been discussion and differences about what those respective amounts should be, especially because what those should be for folks in Johnson County are very different for what folks in maybe Winfield, Kansas would think is reasonable. So we're not talking about something that is going to necessarily blow up county and local government revenue streams, but it is something that's meant to help folks age in place and respect our long-term homeowners who want to stay in their homes. On the sales tax piece, it's important to note that what the governor is proposing and what I support is eliminating only the state portion of the food sales tax and leaving it to cities and counties to make those determinations of what is appropriate for their communities. So what the governor is going to be introducing and what I'm supporting is only to eliminate the 6.5% state part of the food sales tax. I think it's about 1.2. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's about 1.2 that is the local piece of that tax. So we're just really focused on the state portion of that.
And you bring up a good point, because what you're really saying is the state may have a wider tool belt, right, of taxing opportunities. A city, a jurisdiction, a local jurisdiction has a very narrow tool belt. If you're both pulling the same tool out and assessing, say, a food sales tax at the state level and at the local level, the burden is heavier for everyone, because it's two different entities assessing a tax that builds up. And in some cases, we're close, especially around our sales tax, to 10% combined with all the tax.
That's correct. That's right. It's sometimes over 11.5% in some cases. And that's what we've got to be careful. But I'm sorry, this is Representative Croft. I hope I can jump in okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, and as the senator mentioned, actually at the state level, we only focus on that because we've turned it down to the local levels to input their part. When we're doing these bills up here, it focuses on the state portion only. And I think the question was also talking about, so it's talking about the reserves and any other things we're thinking about, right? So one of the things to think about with the reserves is that's a cash in there. When we're talking about making a tax cut, that's permanent. So that means every year it's $400+ million that would be reduced out of the revenue stream. So what do you do about that? And any other things we're considering. So not only can we look at that, we also have to look at how do we make government more efficient? We have to make sure we use every dollar that is given to us in the most efficient manner to get everything we can get done. There's so much out there we need to get done. It's just, there's not enough money actually to do it all. So we got to prioritize, but we got to make ourselves more efficient first. The second thing is, you mentioned other tax things that we might consider. There's two other things in addition to what we're talking about. Property taxes. I mean, it was already talked about the seniors, but one of the bills we've been working on last year was reducing property taxes on a slidable scale based off your income starting at 50,000 and less. So the less money you make, the less property taxes you pay. And so we're kind of working that out. We have a formula that we're using. It's a straight line slope, no cliffs or anything else. And then the other thing to think about is we're one of only 12 states that tax Social Security benefits. We need to look at how do we get rid of taxing that. But we need to do all these things in a manner that makes sense, that it's just not overnight snap done and then we freak out the system. So we're trying to do it in a very, if you will, controlled manner. So we do this efficiently and effectively. I'm sure there's other things, Patty, but I can't think of it. So.
That's great. I know Julie's monitoring the chat here. Julie, are there some?
Yeah, I have the converse side of that are both Representative Croft and Senator Corson discussed in their opening comments about some of the antiquated IT and computer systems and the state employee wages being so low that really filling those positions have become problematic. Are those ways in which to invest the reserves to create more efficient and accuracy in government? Just a question for both of you.
Just so I understand, the question is, do I think it would be a good use of the state reserves to do a pay increase for state employees? Is that?
Yes, and investing in improving the computer systems within state agencies.
I do on both counts. I mean, I think the state employee thing, that's fundamentally just a competitiveness issue. I mean, I'm on the, as Patty mentioned, I'm on the committee on corrections and juvenile justice. We had the opportunity 3 weeks ago to spend some time touring Lansing and touring our juvenile facility in Topeka. And we spent some time with the Secretary of Corrections, who I think is doing a great job, but he was just very candid in their challenges with attracting the number of workers they need. So they have folks who are working 12-hour shifts, folks who are working substantial amounts of overtime. And I do think across our state government, we do need to make sure that folks are able to get at or near what they would be able to get in the private sector. So we have a talented state workforce, which has been over the years a real competitive advantage for our state. And then there's a second part of your question about the investments. I think one thing we need to make sure we're doing a good job of is cybersecurity across state government. I think that's an increasingly important field. I think we don't want to wait until we have an attack. I think, like we saw with Department of Labor, that we were really behind on where we needed to be for a number of reasons over a number of years. But that wasn't really exposed until COVID and the challenges. I would like us on the cyber piece to be more proactive and really be looking at places across the state where we do need to beef up what we're doing on cybersecurity. And then a personal issue that I'm passionate about would be, and there's a lot of this going on already, so I'm not saying it's not happening, but I would love to accelerate expansion of broadband. I think that is a really important and good use of our funds, because that will drive new businesses, that will drive entrepreneurship, that will help build our state's economy across the state.
Yeah, I know, and I'm adding on to it. So, and I agree. One of the things about the IT is, as the senator mentioned, we're already at a cyber war. Look at everything with CAPER. Look what happened with KDOL, almost $700 million in fraudulent payouts. I mean, that was a cyber hack. It's a whole process that's got to be fixed. I think we're way behind in the IT solutions. And I really think, and I know the Senate and the House are doing a deep dive on a lot of this stuff and trying to make sure we get to the bottom of it and maybe start setting the systems and getting us in a better position. So I know a lot of that's going on right now. So I would encourage that to continue to go. And I agree 100% broadband, we've got to get a better way to broadband. The question is how? Like, do you dig in the ground? Do you do it satellite? I'm not that good at all those things. I just like to listen and learn, but I agree. And then the other thing is we talked about is maybe another thing to think about is capers. As we're talking about our employees, one of the things we're trying to do is make sure when we get these good employees, that when they stay and go through that process, that they're actually, their retirement solution is still there when they get ready to use it. And we've made great moves that way, Patty. When you were in the House, you guys did some great stuff to get there. And I think we're starting to see the benefits of that as we're going forward. And so we got to keep that process going and solidifying that fund.
Thanks so much.
Another question that we would have at UCS, quite frankly, is now the time to decouple the state minimum wage from the federal minimum wage? The federal minimum wage hasn't changed in more than a decade. 2012 was the last time there was a change to the federal minimum wage. Is now the time, as we look at attracting and retaining workers, to have more flexibility to champion different minimum wage?
I mean, I'll take that first. I'm going to be introducing a bill to increase our minimum wage and to get our minimum wage up to $15 an hour over a number of years. I do think that we need to have a higher minimum wage in Kansas. I think one of the things that has happened as a result of COVID is it's really shown a spotlight on how vital so many of these workers are to our day-to-day life, to our economy, to our well-being, and the really heroic and courageous work they do. So I'm hopeful that we will have an increased minimum wage in Kansas. I think that we can stair step it over a number of years so it reduces the initial impact on employers. But we need to be paying folks who are working a living wage that is a family sustaining, family supporting wage that they can support their families on and have the dignity that work provides of being able to support your loved ones. Our current minimum wage is a poverty wage. It does not allow for that. So I will be introducing a bill on raising the minimum wage.
Representative Croft, go ahead.
Oh,
Any
okay.
comments?
Yeah, it's obviously not my forte in understanding all of that, the second and third order effects. And one of the things, as you look at, me and what I've done, is I always try to understand the decisions and what's the long-term impact. So I just know that right now, as I've been trying to help constituents get jobs, that there's a lot of people already making more than that $15 we're saying there, and they weren't making it before the pandemic and before we were having all these labor shortages. So I think in many cases, the market's already driving us to there. And so I would want to understand then what would some of the other impacts be, like on the folks in the restaurant business. Many of those folks that are serving in there that are tip-based are asking us not to go this route. So I'm not going to profess to be an expert. And so I'm sure that there's other things I need to learn, and I'm open to listening to all the sides of this discussion as we move forward.
Thanks so much. Regarding broadband, yeah, John Wilson did bring up a good point that the infrastructure, the federal infrastructure bill that passed the House had over 100 million for Kansas for broadband. So there's the possibility for those federal monies that could really help in expansion of that as well.
And then there's a question now around attainable housing solutions and what that looks like at the state level to help pave the way.
Whoever wants to go first can jump in on that. It's usually that's Senator Olson's. That's one of his babies. So it would have been great to.
So we'll defer to Senator Olson.
Yeah, I know. Get him on the phone.
Yeah.
What I would offer is that I would like to look at our state laws and make sure that I would be in favor of eliminating areas where we've restricted local control. I think there are things that we could do at the state level to support affordable housing, but I think primarily that is going to be a county and city government function to make those decisions. So what I would like to do at the state level is have us look at, are there areas where we've restricted the flexibility of our counties and cities to make decisions that could increase affordable housing in those communities? That's where I would start. I would be very open to other ideas about increasing affordable housing stock. But I think one of the things we've done over the years is the state legislature has been really heavy-handed in bearing down on our counties and cities. And in many instances, we've impeded local control. And I think that's where a lot of the good policy around affordable housing will come from. So I would be in favor of eliminating state barriers to letting those municipalities make decisions around affordable housing.
Yeah, and Patty, just to jump on that, it's not just the legislation, though. You got to look at rules and regulations and make sure that all sides, not just the legislature, exactly all of them, are not impeding these things. And I do think, as the senator mentioned, it's more of a local issue. We just got to make sure that at our end, we're not doing that. I do think there's some other things out there that are going to help, like TEFI and some of those other things we passed last year, as it's putting percentages of monies into operating zone or opportunity zones. So there's more to follow on that. It's still a test. We're not really sure how much it'll result for that, but we have seen it already build a grocery store, so that's good. And we'll see, maybe there's some other things will start growing communities.
Thanks so much. Julie, I don't know if you have any other questions from our participants, but I did want to leave just a minute or two. We have about 4 minutes left for them. If you had any comments about the special session that you had yesterday, and what you liked or didn't like about it, or just to address it in any way you would like. So maybe.
And I'll also throw out if Medicaid expansion has an opportunity to see the light of day in the 2022 session.
So you each have 2 minutes left, and then we'll let you off the hook. But maybe address those two things. Representative Croft.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll go first. I always like the senator to go first because he's always the senior guy, but no, this is good. Yesterday was an interesting day. I mean, it was a long day for sure. And I actually like it when we go past midnight. I think it's fun. But then again, I'm a little weird, I guess. I think, it was kind of a historic day. I mean, it was the first time that we've actually called ourselves back into session. So that was interesting unto itself, just that whole process and going through it, and learned a ton yesterday. As much as you read all the rule books and regulations, you don't really realize. But again, one of the things about yesterday was not an anti-vax legislation. It was actually a pro-worker, with trying to balance be balanced between the worker, the employer, and all the other things that are out there. And we tried not to get involved in some of the other legal actions that are going. What I saw was that we were trying to develop a compromise package that will pass muster in court, that won't give false promises to people, that they go out and do stuff, and then all of a sudden they get slammed because we passed the bad legislation. So I was really excited that all the discussion that went in, and I listened to a lot of the Senate. There was a lot of discussion in the Senate. There was a lot of discussion in the House. And I was just excited to hear everybody engaged in that process as they were going through. Even folks that were unable to be there were calling back and being a part of that process. So that was very encouraging to me. I like the fact that, we were still left in the medical exemptions. The doctor still has to be involved in that process. And I thought that was very important, where we just didn't let it, be willy-nilly, but it's actually the doctors in there, the medical exemptions, to not dig into all the details of personal information. But if you're signing up for that, then so be it. And then to keep the executive branch, the Department of Labor, involved in that process, and give them a reasonable amount of time, 60 calendar days, to actually review any complaint that's made. I thought it was fair in that whole process. and all around I thought was a good opportunity. As far as Medicaid expansion, I don't see it going this year. It could, but I'm not a very good prognosticator of these things. I've been terrible at it all the way through. So I just know that I'm staying focused on my lane of redistricting and actually one other thing about yesterday's bill, it didn't include some things in there about the National Guard. Being a former military guy, I'm very, very interested in what we're doing there. But what I really was encouraged by is the staff, the TAG and others in their willingness to just talk about it. And so we backed off that. So we'll look at it again in January to see if we have to do anything, but I honestly don't think we will. I think the executive branch is going to do what they need to do to get this thing done for our National Guard folks. But I hope I answered all your questions. And again, since this is my last chance, right? We're not doing a closing.
Yeah,
One last second, Senator, I apologize. I just encourage you, even if you don't want to provide input on the redistricting virtually, I ask you to go ahead and send your comments in. I read almost all of those emails. Some of them I don't know how we've gotten on some of the email lists, but if they're about buying stuff, so I don't read those. But everything else where people are sending in and giving us advice and giving us opinions and thoughts, man, I really appreciate that. And I would ask that you encourage you to continue to do that. So thank you.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Senator Corson?
Well, I respectfully have kind of a different view of the special session than the representative. I think it was a really, really bad day for our state. The reason is that I think we have let a really anti-vaccine, anti-public health, anti-mask, anti-public education, what used to be a fringe group really has become mainstream. And I mean, I'll speak for the Senate. And I was fairly optimistic in the rest of my comments, so I really hate to end on a dour note like this, but I think it's important to be honest with the folks who are listening. The majority of the Republicans in the Kansas Senate are anti-vaccine, anti-science, and there has been just a ton of misinformation that is really dangerous to public health. I think this bill is really detrimental to our businesses. None of my local chambers supported this. It puts our businesses in a really impossible position where if they do one thing, they're violating state law. If they do another thing, they're violating federal law. It also impedes on what has been a staple of Kansas being a right to work state over a number of years, in that employers should have the ability to set what they believe are safe working conditions in their particular workplace. We're now getting into that arena where the state is engaging with and telling private employers what they can and can't do with respect to the health and safety of their own businesses. We're exposing them to massive legal liability, both in terms of these penalties that could be assessed, but also in terms of potential litigation that is bound to happen for this. So what we've done is we've really layered uncertainty on top of uncertainty. There's already a lot of uncertainty around the federal issues that are being challenged in court. Now we put a state piece into this, which is confusing and poorly written, and nobody's really sure what its effect is going to be. We're going to end up in court on this bill, and it's not going to solve the real problems that it purports to. But more broadly, I am just worried about, we heard a number of things on the Senate floor yesterday about how the vaccine is dangerous, the vaccine kills people, a lot of just misinformation. I think it's really shameful that a majority of the Republican Party in the Senate has really bought into this stuff, and we are spreading this disinformation to Kansans that flies in the face of all of the medical evidence and flies in the face of all of the experts who are telling us that the vaccine is safe, the vaccine is effective, the vaccine is free. And our way out to get back to normal, which is what we all want, is to have folks take this free, safe, effective vaccine. And I think we do a real disservice when, for political opportunity or for other reasons, we cater to the whims of what used to be a sort of fringe group. And look, we're just going to see more anti-vaccine bills. The bill that was filed yesterday after this bill is a bill that would make it easier for school children to get exemptions from all vaccines. that are currently required to attend public schools. So I just think we're going down a dangerous road in terms of public health and safety. I was deeply disappointed in yesterday, and I worry about that. I'll give you another sort of dour note. And again, I was so optimistic throughout this. I don't see a path for Medicaid expansion given the makeup of the Kansas Senate. I think that's really unfortunate. I've been a huge supporter of Medicaid expansion. I will continue to be a supporter of Medicaid expansion. I think it's an economic imperative for our businesses and for our healthcare providers. It's a moral imperative. I'm a huge supporter, but given the makeup of that chamber, that is essentially anti-public health, anti-climate, anti-science, anti-vaccine, I don't see us passing Medicaid expansion.
And we appreciate both of your participation today and really sharing your thoughts on both sides of the issues and on both sides of the aisle. Patty, it is time to close out the legislative panel. So we appreciate both of your comments and both of your time today. And we're closing out with our special partner that supports the Public Policy Forum every year. And so Todd Jordan from United Way of Greater Kansas City, we'll turn it over to you, Todd, to close this out today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie, and good morning, everybody. Really appreciate the opportunity to get to close out here. And don't worry, for most of you that know me, I'm fairly efficient and quick on time, so I'm sensitive to where we're at. My name's Todd Jordan. I'm the Chief Community Engagement Officer here with United Way of Greater Kansas City, which serves 6 counties across the metro, including Johnson County. I grew up in Lenexa, and I'm a proud product of the Shawnee Mission School District. And while I have moved around a little bit, I continue to be deeply tied to Johnson County, including serving on the local Workforce Development Board, which met this morning. So like many of you, it's already been a full day. I would like to thank all of our elected officials, public servants, stakeholders, and community members who joined us this morning. I know it's tempting to already be on vacation and maybe have the turkey already brining, but we appreciate your time and effort to be part of the discussion today. I would also like to give Julie Brewer, the staff and board of UCS, a massive thank you for once again putting together a wonderful event. United Way of Greater Kansas City is proud to have an excellent planning partner in UCS, and the Kansas Public Policy Forum is just one example of that partnership in action. Today, we had an expansive discussion, one that reflects on our past as a state and what we'll need to do together as we move into 2022 and beyond. One of the biggest benefits of working for United Way is the power of the network. I serve on the United Way State Association Board, and that means I get to connect with different types of organizations all over Kansas. One-person shops, multi-million-dollar agencies, different types of governments, local, state, and regional, rural, suburban, small town, and urban, United Ways and partner agencies. And while there are nuances in every community, some of the core issues that I see time and time again are the same. Affordable housing, transportation, food insecurity, access to healthcare, those are always on the list. But access to quality and affordable early childhood education and care is a universal need, largely for the reasons why Melissa and John eloquently laid out at the start of our presentation today. It's critical for the development of children and set them up for a lifetime of learning, or set them back and require intensive and more costly interventions later. It's key to single and multi-caregiver households so that adults can get to school themselves, maybe get into that certification program that lets them get a new job or just get to work. These centers are a vital part of our local economy, both ensuring the availability of workforce, but also because childcare centers are themselves often small businesses. And it's a picture that gets more complicated when you consider many households are caught having to care up for aging adults while also care down for children, families struggling with children with disabilities, finding a system and a place where they can place them. The point is the short-term benefits of support for early childhood education and care, poverty alleviation, small business support, meeting workforce needs, and the long-term benefits are absolutely critical and are reasons why it's a prime area for collective action. But you can't look at this challenge in a vacuum, and I think that's been one of the threads in the discussion I've noticed today. Transportation and housing are tied to childcare and education, and the disruption in one cascades to impact the others. All of these factors are the foundation of a good life. They were needs that existed before COVID, they've been exacerbated by the COVID pandemic, and they will remain with us even as we recover. Big city or small town, rural or urban, those among us who have been left behind are counting on us the most, and we have to deliver. They are the priority. They are the ones who need empowerment and must be the focus of policymaking. The solutions to these problems, though, in many instances, for problems that have been generations in the making, won't come without compromise, respect, and willingness to listen to the data, to reason, and to change our own mind as much as we seek to change the minds of the others. It'll also take revenue, and that's just putting it bluntly, which has always been somewhat of a longstanding challenge for local government as well as at the state level. The subsiding of the pandemic, knock on wood, does not change the fundamental issues we struggle with in Kansas. And while we can do a lot as a united way with great partners like UCS and hundreds of nonprofits all over the state and the support of amazing corporate partners and foundations, we know that if we want major transformation that can move the needle on issues of poverty, education, and healthcare, we need effective policymaking. And forums like today are critical to fostering the education and mutually beneficial dialogue that builds meaningful advocacy efforts, as well as builds good policy. It takes public, private, and nonprofit sectors working together, as we were able to do in Kansas City with the COVID Regional Relief Fund, the distribution of funding under the CARES Act and now under ARPA, the work of UCS and the housing study they did for Johnson County, or the innovative collaboration they're driving with the Health Equity Network. That sort of collaboration is what got us through the COVID-19 crisis and is also what is going to allow us to create a better future as we look to build anew. Again, I thank you to our elected officials and for all of you to being with us today, for doing what you can to push an inclusive and equitable Kansas forward. A big thank you to UCS for such a wonderful and collaborative event, and to all the participants on the call for the passion that you display for our community, because forums like this are the best way to continue to shape the future of our state, our country, and the world. Thank you all for your time today, and safely enjoy the holidays.
Thank you so much, Todd. And thank you to all our participants today. Take a moment and open up your mics and your cameras, and certainly greet your friends and colleagues as we sign off. And I share Todd's thanks to our speakers and to our legislative panel, and the strong belief that it is through open discussion and the ability to come together through forums like this that we all become participants in our democracy and helping shape our policy. And with that, I wish all of you a happy and safe Thanksgiving. And if you change to gallery view, everybody should be able to see each other and wave. And so appreciate the time, the attention, and the participation. And once again, special thanks to our legislative panel. We know you had a long night. We certainly appreciate you coming and sharing your expertise this morning. Good night, good afternoon, and have a great rest of your day.